So businesses around the world have been devastated by the global coronavirus pandemic, but small and medium-sized companies are being hardest hit, particularly the taxi industry, as we've just seen, is no exception. And these challenges mean possible job losses, and many would say some are inevitable, most of the small and particularly unorthodox businesses. Well, to get a sense of just how serious the situation is, we now speak to economist Owen Nkomo, who's talking to us via Skype. Owen, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Peter. It's good to be here.
All right, I see you've got your jacket on. Is it a bit chilly there?
Yeah, it's very chilly, man, and I already feel very underdressed looking at you, right?
All right, so we've just seen a clip now about the standoff between the taxi industry and the transport minister. The 1.1 billion rand that's been offered to the industry collectively sounds like a lot, but for many of these taxi drivers, they own small little businesses. Even though they belong to an industry sector that's enormous, a lot of them are small businesses, and they are feeling the effects, much like the rest of the small business sector.
Yes, most definitely they are feeling the pressure, particularly if you think about the fact that they're not allowed to carry maximum passengers in their vehicles. Certainly that is a painful point for them. They're not maximizing on the revenue, and at the same time, it takes a long time to fill up even one taxi during this COVID environment. So you can really sincerely feel the difficulty that these guys are going through at the moment. And as you saw on that video, that gentleman talking about their monthly installments for these taxis that are anything above 10,000 odd rands, the interest rates in this sector that these guys get charged are ridiculous because they are deemed as very high risk guys. Whereas I think that the guys who are loaning money to these guys for many decades have not stepped up to the plate, in my humble view, to give them some sort of reprieve, which has happened in some cases in other business sectors. So I kind of sympathize with the taxi industry on this one.
But the other side of this, of course, is that Treasury only has so much money because not very many people, compared to the total population, contribute in terms of taxes. So how do you balance this? Treasury can't keep pouring money into saving businesses, but businesses also desperately need help because if they don't, they're going to collapse.
It's a difficult balancing act, Peter, but I can certainly say that there is no sector in the country that has received as much money as it has asked for. We know of people who have asked for 100,000 rands to help them with their salary bills, and they've only got 20,000, they've got 30,000 rands. But we haven't seen those guys going to the streets to block roads and, fight against the government, which already is under a lot of pressure. I think that this is an opportunity for the government and the taxi industry to have a nice prosperity and say, how can we improve things going forward? How can the government and the taxi industry work together to make sure that every taxi driver, every taxi out there complies with the regulations of the country, is fairly registered, and importantly, the government sources relatively cheaper funding for the taxi industry so that these guys don't have to pay these exorbitant prices and they get in line to be subsidized by the government, because they play a very important role, as you already know, of transporting people to work throughout the country, because we don't have a great public transport network in South Africa. So I do think that a good conversation that is very much required to sort of solve the challenge that these guys are currently facing.
All right, let's talk about the SMME sector in general. And we know that most of the jobs and future jobs are going to come from the SMME sector. It's not the big companies that are going to be the big employers. So if they are the ones that are going to collapse first, that means job losses are inevitable.
Oh, without a doubt, Peter. We can't be romantic about this one. We think that 33%, potentially to 37% unemployment is a number we're going to see on the register tomorrow because of the COVID environment. Definitely unemployment is going to increase. And with that, you will see social unrest. People are already challenged by the difficult social environment. They are already challenged by the fact that they can't find jobs and the economy is not turning around quite urgently as it should be. So I do expect many people to lose jobs, and I do expect social unrest to be the byproduct of that. So we have a long and very difficult road to walk back towards making sure that the country can work and jobs can be created. And I hope that the presidency and his team, are doing their best to make sure that post-COVID, enough support, enough communication, enough cooperation between the unions and the government and the private sector is happening to make sure that we can see a quicker recovery in this unemployment number. But I do think we all have to embrace the fact that things will get tougher before they get easy.
One area that's often not covered very well because it's sometimes hard to measure is the informal economy, which is quite sizable. And I guess they're also feeling the pinch. And with that shrinking, the picture for the country generally going forward economically isn't very good at all. Hello, Owen, are you still there?
No, it's still great.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah.
I'm still here.
Okay. Your thoughts?
So the picture, the informal sector is a big contributor across Africa. It's the biggest contributor in Nigeria, for example, and across the rest of the sub-Saharan economies. And I do think that those guys that sell stuff in the corner of the road, those mothers of ours who are selling veggies at the taxi rank, they're going to get very badly affected. And I think they are feeling it already. The government tried to open up for them to go back and sell stuff, but because the rest of the economy hadn't opened up, they didn't have any customers. So I really think that, in my view, this is a great opportunity for us to shape a different economy going forward, only if, Peter, the government and all these other sectors can get together and make sure everyone is registered. We know who's selling what and where they are. We know what their needs are. We know just how much they're contributing to the country as tax contribution. For example, someone was saying that the taxi industry doesn't contribute much by way of tax because, there is no regulation, people are not registered, and it's a cash-based industry, just like the informal sector is. So it's difficult to tax those guys. Maybe what you do, you say everyone who's got a tax, you expect you to pay this amount of cash as sort of tax, even if it's not based on revenue targets and things like that. Just give them some sort of tax so they contribute as well to the fiscus of the country, and it makes it easy for the country to manage the number of taxi drivers who are out there, the number of operators, and to help them in an environment like the one that the guys are going through, which applies to the rest of the informal sector, Peter. Many people survive every day because of the small guys that are in the informal sector, and I do think they do deserve to be supported.
All right, so if we seconded you to the Small Business Ministry, what would you be telling the minister to do as a matter of urgency?
I would tell her to get a big packet of tablets that's going to help her to not sleep, Peter, because there is no time to sleep for the Minister of Small Businesses. This country depends on her doing very well and working very hard. And in fact, we are hoping to meet her sometime soon with the support maybe of the Office of the Presidency. There's an idea we're trying to propose to the Minister of Small Businesses that we're hoping is going to help out, at least save some of the carnage that we are seeing in the country at the moment. So focus on small business. Make sure you take advantage of this dire situation and you create the right platforms to make sure that all these small businesses are registered, people get training, and they get, skilled in terms of managing the finances. And someday this sector becomes a big enough sector and it can play a contribution in terms of tax. Think about Nigeria. The bulk of Nigeria's economic activity comes from the informal sector, and Nigeria has got a bigger economy than ours on a GDP basis. So I think there is certainly room for the Minister of Small Businesses to partner with guys like us and with the rest of small business to cut corruption and give us access to government work so that we can thrive as well, Peter. And I do think that she's one of the most important people in this environment, which is Kumbuzo. And I hope that, she's working as hard as we expect it to be to make sure that we can save jobs and actually create more jobs. Working together with the private sector, and thinking differently from the union's perspective about things, I do think the government can deliver, some sort of recovery that can help us save jobs. And we're here to support the Minister Kumbuza with ideas if she's in need of ideas. And we're here to work. We're young and energetic, Peter. We can do this. Let's all stay hopeful, but let us all work together.
All right, so all of this has to happen in an economic environment. And sometimes we quickly forget that before COVID-19, our economy was in recession. What can be done to kickstart it, to give it that electric shock that gets it off the ground? Because something needs to happen. I mean, the OECD recently gave us some really bleak numbers in terms of what the likely scenario might be, especially if we get a second wave.
Yes, I mean, we're already hearing those memos coming out of the USA about the second wave of infections, highest number of infections on a daily basis this past week and past 2 odd days. And I think if we get that in South Africa and in the emerging markets as well, you will see more desperation from the economic perspective. But we need to see more coordinated responses from global leaders. We need to see more coordinated. If we're deciding that we're going to open up the economies, let's at least see some coordinated efforts from all these countries. Because, Peter, think about it. If South Africa opens up and Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and our other neighbors don't open up, and the rest of Europe is not opening up, where are we going to market the stuff that we're producing in the country? And how are we going to get imports coming into South Africa? So a good level of coordination is important. And I think a refocus by the Minister Tito Mboweni of his current budget, as he's going to do this week, is very important to make sure that most of that cash gets driven towards those sectors that can quickly turn around and create more jobs or save jobs and make a contribution to the GDP. And I think we have to be creative as well in terms of where we get funding and where interest rates are for this funding to support black business, particularly, and small enterprises. And I do think we need to think outside the box, Peter, particularly about this money that's been given to the big banks to say this money is to support small enterprises, but only a very small portion of those small enterprises is getting that support from the government. So there has to be a conversation there that happens, and there has to be a conversation with banks as well to say, can we be flexible and try different ways of creating funding solutions so that companies don't go under? Because, Peter, it's very sad that if people lose jobs, you're going to get more crime, you're going to get more social unrest. And I think that is very important for the government to act expeditiously and make sure that all these ministries are working together and looking at the challenge that the country is facing, which is an unemployment number which will be above 30% for a protracted period of time. It's not going to take us 6 months to get back to where we were 4 months ago, Peter.
All right, Owen, that's where we're going to leave it. But thanks so much indeed. Always valuable insights that you share with us. Stay warm and stay safe.
Thank you, sir.
All right, that's Owen Nkomo, economist, talking to us about the challenges that we're facing, many of which but it does seem that a coordinated effort, various layers and various stakeholders needs to happen all at the same time. And the poor business minister, she says that she mustn't sleep. We'll have more for you after this.